Well, thank you. It's always enjoyable to be here and to the people at home. I like the email story that Brad told. It happened to me this past week. Do you ever get those government emails? And I get a lot of them. And then you're not paying much attention to it. And then you get the one saying, I'd like to recall this message. And once you get the message saying, I want to recall it, you go and look at that email and say, what was in there? What was in there that we missed that we had to recall it? I also enjoyed the story about with the kids there. Not as much before COVID, but going to the grade schools is a real education because you get your best sample of public opinion from kids. You know, remember Art Linkletter? Kids say the darndest things? Well, they do. On one occasion, do you remember the McPherson Fountain? When it first opened, it was very controversial. It should have been built as a sculpture. It wasn't a fountain per se. So I'm over at a Lady of Mercy school, and it's grade 3. You can always tell where it's coming from in the home. This kid gets up and says, Mr. Mayor, why'd you build a stupid fountain that doesn't work? And what I like about that is some places you go, people try to tell you how much they know before they ask the questions. Kids don't. And the other story, which always haunted me at the time, I was at Hannah Memorial in a grade 3 or 4 class, and they have this perception of this great power the mayor has. And this little girl gets up and she says, Mr. Mayor, can you get my parents back together? Oh. No kidding. I didn't have the answer. The teacher consoled her, and she said that was good because we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what it was. I just wish the parents could have seen that. So it's always good to listen to kids, and before a few brief remarks, some of the best projects I brought forward weren't mine. That big skateboard park at Canatera was kids. They built their own. People got all upset about insurance and risk and stuff. So anyhow, I brought them up to the mayor's office. They're 14, 15, and 16, and said, look, if I could find the money, would you design a park for us? And we did find the money, half from the city and I believe half from Seaway Kiwanis within a week or so. And they got to design it. And I keep on trying to remind them and other young people when I'm speaking, just because you don't have a vote doesn't mean you don't have a voice. And that has happened a number of times. And one final story was, I never forgot, he was probably a billionaire by now, but there was a young kid in the North End by Newton Park, and 5, 6 years of age, and he wanted to set up a lemonade stand. And his mother said, you can't do that. City bylaws that had contracts and stuff. Well, this kid at 5 didn't believe that, so he made an appointment to come and see me with his mother. So we gave him a special letter that day he could be in the park. He made $1,000 because it was in the media quite a bit. So it was that again. Imagine the courage of doing that, to go do that. So I've always enjoyed that. I posted on social media before I came here, just very briefly. You saw what the description of what I was going to talk about. All I can tell you for 2025 is this. It's going to be a roller coaster ride from hell. It's that simple. And all I can do and what you can do is do your best to deal with it. And you talked about all these news shows. Like the news cycle is changing on a 4 or 5 hour basis, dealing with some of the issues we're dealing with. And I've been fortunate, this past few weeks to be questioned quite a bit by the media, international, CNN and others. I had a crew all day with me about 2 weeks ago from NBC, the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation. I'm really big in Norway right now. But they're fascinated. I was fascinated with them. There was a young woman videographer and a reporter who was older. And I asked them what was your worst assignment, most dangerous one. The one had been in Iraq. And the other young woman, and she's going back there this year to do a story about the exploitation of Ukrainian women by the Russians. She got caught between the Ukrainian army and the Russian army in a firefight. But she's still going back there because she believes in telling the news. The other interesting part of the discussion was they can't get access to any American presidential event. Even CBC can't, because they just shut them out. They don't need them and they don't care. Or I should say some don't care. So it's been good to do that, to get that message out. And there's a very, I want to say, parochial issue. And let me do my budget thing. We've set the budget, it's about 3 or 4%, including the city and the county, $60 million in capital spending. The issue tomorrow night with the airport and keeping it or not. So those things go on, right? But the real issue for right now, and I'm so glad it seems to have elevated at the national and international level, is the future of Canada. And it's this simple. If you look at Sarnia, we are right in the crosshairs on this one. Line 5 goes from Alberta through the United States into Sarnia under the St. Clair River. And it's been an issue in the past, but now it can be shut off instantly. The other thing that hasn't showed up much in the media, the gas that goes to Nova comes from Pennsylvania. So my message out there has been to these different premiers and the Prime Minister speaking about retaliation. You better figure this one out, because whatever you do here, and it may feel good, you better figure out the consequences elsewhere. And the other part of this, because I've heard the government, just like in COVID, where they step forward lots of programs to assist people. Good stuff. Looking back, we realized some of it was rushed and not thought through. My big concern right now is this, that it looks like the government, if the tariffs come down, or there will be some version of them coming at the end of the month, they're going to rush out with all sorts of programs. We're into the long game on this one. We got 4 years of this. So we need to pace ourselves. We need to pace ourselves on what we do to retaliate, and we need to pace ourselves dealing with just what's important to deal with and what's not important to deal with. And a lot of this stuff that you see from the South there is not that important in the scheme of things. It's the disrespect for Canada. I think Trudeau the other day sort of had it nailed in his unplanned leak of information. They had a couple hundred people there for this border conference. And then they asked all the media to leave, not expecting anyone to report his remarks. I used to work at Ottawa. That's a strategy. But what he was trying to get on the record was that when you get away from all the smoke and the mirrors and all that stuff, it's all about destabilizing Canada to make it the 51st state. Wouldn't that be great? American healthcare, American gun control. Let me just continue. And I'm not anti-American. When Trump was elected, I said clearly that we have to respect the judgment. But this is different this time. I went through the 4 years, as you did, when he was first there. But he didn't have the control he has today. He has absolute control of the government, and they're scared. I did a call 2 or 3 weeks ago with a group of Great Lakes mayors. We work very closely, Democrats, Republicans, nonpartisans like myself, Canadian American mayors. It's different now. And we were told by a mayor out of Michigan, you should be quiet. From now on, it's America first, America first, America first. And the sad part about that is we're a nonpartisan group that's just focused on environmental issues, cleaning up the Great Lakes and protecting them. And one of the issues that's a side issue as it relates to the Trump administration is over the years, there's been many plans to take water out of the Great Lakes. And you've seen what he's done recently, suggesting from Colombia and then releasing water to people that didn't really need the water. But that's a precious commodity. Also really concerned, we fought off repeatedly over the years, oil drilling in the Great Lakes. I can see that as being a reality. That's not being alarmist. So there's all these pressing issues out there that are going to make a difference to your lives. And the irony is with tariffs, even with Line 5, if it shuts down, it's going to hurt Michigan. That's where the jet fuel comes from here to the airport in Detroit. 60% of the propane goes to northern Michigan. So there's all these things, and again, I was asked on some of these interviews, why do you, well, one said, what was the last one? It was CTV yesterday morning. They asked, if you could get in Donald Trump's brain, what would you do? And my very honest response was, I'd mark it because I'd be a rich man. I would be, because you can't. And we're getting all these reaction, which is meant to provoke. But it's also disrespectful to us as Canadians. And I was asked in one interview, I think it was CNN, about, give us some reasons. And I said, well, maybe the 160, 170 Canadians who died in Afghanistan, that's a reason. Or the fact we were first in line after 9/11 with border security, and we lost Canadians in 9/11. First and Second World War, we were first in. The Americans came later. So we've stood by each other. And I see what's going on now is the biggest threat to this country since the separation threat back in the 80s and the Second World War. That's how bad this is going to be for us. And once we get through the rhetoric and get into the long haul, and he'll just play cat and mouse games with us, even if we do come up with some solution on the so-called tariff, which, by the way, is a tax. That's all it is. Most people didn't know what a tariff was 2 months ago, including myself. So what it is, it's a tax. It would be a tax on Americans. And what I'm just leading as I conclude here is that what he'll do, the president, he will blame Canada. It's not my fault your gasoline's gone up through the roof. It's not my fault your vegetables, your food, everything is higher. It's Canada's fault because we've been subsidizing them all these years. And unfortunately, some of that spin works with certain people. So we've got to stay focused as Canadians. We're going to have new leadership at the federal level, which is most welcome in the sense that you can't have a country drifting in the middle of a major crisis. No matter what your politics is, it's just not the right way to move forward. And Ontario's in an election, and we'll see where that goes. But we need to get our own act together. As we move into this end of the month deadline, which I'm sure will be extended or changed somewhat. And even I saw the Premier of Alberta, 10% we can work with that. That's still 10% on our product. And that is not going to help them or us in the long term. So got away from what I normally talk about here, but I'm really more interested in your questions. And so I thank you again for having me. It's always enjoyable. And I even got in with a secret code this morning. That was pretty good. So questions? You're always good.
What would be the reason for shutting down the pipeline? Yes,
Yeah, speaking of it.
what would be the reason for shutting the pipeline?
Retaliation. If we decide to cut off, Ford's talked about cutting off hydro to the US. And again, no one wins in a tariff war. The collateral damage will be on both sides of the border and elsewhere in the world. But, everyone says Whitmer wanted to shut down the pipeline. And Trump wouldn't do it. He likes pipelines. He likes American pipelines. I don't think he's as keen. And if he wanted to do a quick action, this is one, the tariffs usually take a long time to kick in. They just don't happen tomorrow morning. There's a whole supply chain issue. This one would send a real message to us. I noticed the Federal Canadian Minister of Energy that they talked about that they're concerned about Line 5. So if you want to, and I'll tell you this, it's not just parochial for Sarnia and Lambton. There are 5,000 products that come out of Line 5 that are made. And so we are fighting for Line 5. We got all the political parties except the Green on board to support it because the propane goes to the farmers in Quebec. Again, the 5,000 products here. It's in the auto chain, supply chain, and it's important here. And we have 3 refineries. There's 4 on this side of Canada. We're the Eastern Energy Hub, and 3 of them are here. So if you want to give us just even a brief jolt, it can happen.
Thanks, I'm Chuck McKenzie. As many people, I feel frustrated by the ballooning police budgets across Canada in recent years. I often have conversations downtown in the coffee shops trying to better understand this whole issue, and issues come up such as IT departments, as in all agencies, and then there's provincial mandates for new equipment, and of course the training which comes with the equipment. But the overarching issue seems to be a fund that has just been recently started with the police board over new headquarters. So my question to you, Mayor Mike, is are you supportive of a fund by the police board for new headquarters?
Really good question. I left the police board 2 years ago because of my concern about secrecy and spending. And I've been on the police board, it's a part of your job as mayor, but you don't have to serve on it, so I stepped down. They threatened, the board did, because I was critical of their budget, to file a code of conduct complaint on me, because I was critical. And they did the same thing with David Boucher. He stepped down, then I stepped down. 36% increase that we know of in 3 years. And I've had no difficulty, and I did in the past, support upgrades to the mental health team, to the frontline officers. A lot of this money in this 3 years is going to administration. They had 8 administrators 18 months ago. They now have 19 in the $100,000 club. And there's lots of things I'd like for the city every day, but I also have to have that balance. So yeah, they've moved forward to look at a new headquarters. And just keep in mind that present headquarters was upgraded over the years and was built in 1987. It's monument building in my case, my belief. And I'm certainly down the road going to be strongly speaking out about they don't need a brand new facility. And I can tell you in Sudbury, I think it's hit 100 to 150 million. If I can back up, the reason we can do so much road work, the most we've ever done this year, is because we've basically eliminated our debt. And that 13 or 14 cents, and I hope there's no bankers here, that was going to the bankers for 20 years has not been going to the bankers, and we've been putting it straight back into the community. So if they were to proceed, because they don't have the funds, that would wipe all that 20 years of working with councils to reduce the debt, keep spending control, and that got us through COVID. Because we were lean and we weren't taking on extra things that we couldn't afford. Again, lots of friends, police officers, and I know there's a survey that's being done in the police department, which hasn't been released, which indicates morale is not good there. Chiefs from Halton Hills, deputies from Halton Hills. The former deputy was from Halton Hills. We have qualified people in this community. There's one that's come in, a new deputy, but basically it's become the Halton Hills Police Department, where maybe spending doesn't matter. But what we have to do as a city council, because it's the councillors that have to raise the tax money, we've had to push back on other programs and support for people because of the increase, 36%. Same playback books being played out everywhere else. It's using that element of, crime has risen in communities and homelessness is out there. So sort of support those activities and dealing with that. But they're using it. Every place I look, the police department's using it to grab the money. And again, in your life, 36% increase for 3 years, and I don't think it's going to get better. So I'm waiting, Chuck, to answer your question for the right moment, and you'll see where this is going to go.
I'm just wondering what's happening with the former Bayside site. There's supposed to be a building. Is there any update on what's going on there?
Yeah, the county has control of that. And there was a building to go up for Seasons Development. They've decided right now not to proceed. So the property's up for sale. And my understanding is there's probably some issues there as it relates to the former garage. You might remember it was underneath the property there. There has been some active interest, I understand, on some sort of high rise there. But I will tell you, we had another credible condo person or apartment builder is looking at another major project in Sarnia too. So we're still getting activity, but that one is just sort of sitting there right now. And it'll be up to the county. They've got 3 years, Seasons does, to act on that property. In my view, they shouldn't have done the deal because the county built the new county building there and they were going to be the landlord for 20 years. So what the county did after 3 months was buy them out at great expense. You can say, yeah, we're going to save some money, 20 years down the road, but it was a debt or expense I didn't think we had to take on. So now that's still sitting there. I was told there's an interest from an outside party to build something credible there. And it's part of what we've been doing downtown, right? The new tri-car building's brought is full. It's downtown. Our downtown, compared to others, has held its own despite all the issues we're dealing with. And that's good. That's good. And there's a lot of good. And actually, I'm meeting with, there's a new group called the Downtown Collective, and I think I'm meeting with them this coming week just to talk. It's a group of property owners and business people that have come together, which is what I've always wanted, grassroots, trying to keep downtown going. And last night it was jammed even with the bad weather. It was a big show at the Imperial. And the first Friday was the night before. So there's good things going on there, and I think out of town investors are seeing that it's still fundamentally strong, despite some of the big social issues we've dealt with.
Maybe I'll go next. Homeless. What's your view on homeless in the city?
My view? It shouldn't be happening in Canada. It shouldn't be happening in any city in Canada or the United States. And what I believe we've seen in the last year or two is basically a social rebellion. That's what I think we're witnessing. Because you see in different communities, they say, wait, we have enough spaces. We can put you in a shelter. And people say, I don't care. I'm going to stay out, what's the phrase they use, living rough? And we saw that this year. I can say we're one of the few communities that had a plan. We got a lot of criticism about the expense, because we're not it's the county that's supposed to be responsible for the homeless, and they got 10 million for it last year, and we got 0. And I had that discussion last Monday with the county, not particularly successfully. But the fact is, you've got a combination of things post-COVID. You've got addictions, mental health, and you've just got this rebellion against, I'm not gonna, and I will say this, and think it's my own social comment. Before in communities, the homeless were sort of over there or over there, and they weren't really as evident to people. Now, for the middle class, they're in their face, and they're there. But the plan we adopted at Rainbow, at one point, we believe we're around 90 or 100 people there. And if you left, the gates closed. Last count I had on Friday, we're probably down to about 6 or 8 people. And some have gone to shelters, some have gone to accommodations, some we don't know where they went. And we are prepared now with, see, there were 3 court cases that said we couldn't get an injunction. 3 cities tried, couldn't get an injunction. There's a case out of Hamilton that said you can get an injunction. So we haven't got one, but we've put ourselves, positioned ourselves, I think, quite well. But you can also, the empathy bank, I may have said this last year when I was here, the empathy bank with Canadians is really low on those issues. You may have seen the county council meeting the other day talking about the neighborhood around Melrose Place, off Exmouth there. It's an overflow shelter. And I am totally sympathetic to the neighbors because there's been a lot of issues happening in the neighborhood. But unfortunately, there's an affordable housing project, a big one, supposed to go right by that church. And now the opposition's already built up. And it's almost constant anymore. I was in the media, I think Friday, talking about a woman's interval home. Has been working with them for a year or 2 to find some land the city has for transitional housing. And they came up with a good location. And we think we can make it work. It's right behind the Strangway Center. It's not a big project. And it's not parkland per se, but it's in the park, Jermaine there. I'm already getting objections from Jermaine, from people on London Road. We don't want those people here. We're talking about victims going into a transitional home that would give them 18 months at least. Because an existing home can only keep you for so long before they have to put you someplace. So that's what you run into almost every issue now. The one thing that I had just to get to the immediate, we've done some good things here. There's 24 beds coming to Blue Water Health. It's taken like 20 years, different governments. But the big announcement last Monday, which some people said, well, it looked like a political announcement. I didn't care. Been trying it for years. We're going to have one of the few 18 new hubs in Ontario. And we beat out a lot of other cities, which will stop that revolving door. We've got mental illness, this is what who deals with it. We've got drug addiction, this is what deals with it. We've got housing issues, you're over here. It'll bring it all together. And it's going to be $6 million a year from the province. There is a location. One's going to be in that building. There's a small number of people will be dealt with down where the county building is, where the Bayside Mall is. But there is another location where 30 people could be treated. I can't say where it is right now. I know where it is, but I'm just preparing myself that there will be a real push. And I hate the cliche NIMBY, but it's what's happening. It doesn't matter what you do. It's always the same expression. And again, I'm not, the Melrose people, I understand fully their issues, but everyone says to you, I totally support helping the homeless. But, and then I would ask you, in any place in this community, where would you now put an overflow shelter? Working and putting people in the hotels had its drawbacks and had severe drawbacks. And I'll close by saying, the people that are still in Rainbow are really going to be a tough group to deal with. A number cannot get into the shelters, banned for life. A number can't get into the county's shelter and the motels because it had past actions there that stopped them from getting there. So I'd ask you the question, what do you do with them? Well, the only thing left is jail. Yeah. And so it's a big issue, but it's on my mind every day. I mean, I was downtown last night watching the guy, I see him every day, and we sort of have an acquaintance. He's got a couple of shopping carts. He starts out by the bay every day, and he comes down Exmouth and comes down Christina Street. He's got the best organized shopping carts I've ever seen. And he doesn't bother anyone. He just goes out every day, and that's his mission, and then he comes back. But that bothers people. It bothers me that he's on the street like that, but he's probably not someone we can get into a shelter. And shelters aren't the answer. It comes down to over and over again, housing. And we're making some progress, but we got a long way to go. There's a lot of units coming out of Kathleen. There's a project plan for St. Bartholomew's in the North End. We've done a rezoning on the London Road property where there was a youth group there, and there's going to be a building going up there. There's another building being considered for another location not far from here. So there's a lot of things happening, but it takes time. It's going to take a year, 2, 3 years to get those projects. So that was my long answer to you, but it's a complicated issue. It's not simple. This idea of just sweeping people out of the parks with billy clubs, that's from the 1930s. Simply isn't the answer.
You just bring them somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you learn as you get older is try to make your phrases redolent, but I've been using this phrase about whack-a-mole.
Yeah.
You remember that? Hit this, and 3 other things. That's exactly what happens. And that's why we held back, even though there was a lot of criticism on the expensive rainbow. Even though we've got an injunction, we weren't prepared as a community to take care of where those people would go. And I think we're in better shape now with some of the things that have happened. Anyone else? I know you're getting close on time here.
I wondered about public washrooms, access to public washrooms. I know in the summertime along Howard Watson Trail, there's a washroom, but people use the trail all winter long. And many of businesses downtown aren't allowing people to use the washroom. I mean, I guess the library probably does, but I myself would like to be in our downtown and not have to buy something to use a washroom. It's a basic human right. And I know there was expense in Rainbow Park, but I would have paid for a washroom. Really, it's such a necessity, and people get such a bad name because they have to use a washroom, but they can't. They have no money. So I would like to advocate for more public access to washrooms.
Yeah, and you're not alone. But you just speak at sort of a high level. We've looked at that, and the library has become the sort of the center because they are there, and they used to have the mall that had washrooms. I can just speak from a city point of view. We've had tremendous issues in our washrooms in Canatera. We had our washrooms at Clearwater Arena destroyed. And the part of the problem is how to build one that you can also make vandal-proof and not a place where people can hide illegal activities, which is a pretty hard thing to do. I've asked our people to take, Grand Bend's come up with a washroom apparently that cleans itself and does all that stuff. But we did a survey on the waterfront about 10 or 15 years ago. I think the number 2 request was more washrooms. So it's not out of our minds, it's how do we do them and keep them safe? And that was even part of the problem at Rainbow, that the washrooms were being used for activities that, are not suitable. So that's the problem. And as you say, a lot of the businesses just said, we're not doing it anymore. And so I think you'll see some movement. We're going to do some upgrades in Canatera. Howard Watts is a bit more problematic, and the waterfront is an issue. And again, I'm sounding negative here, but when we put in some porta johns for the fishermen, well, they became bloodbaths. They were using them to cut up the fish and do all that stuff, right? So I'm just telling you what we have to deal with, right? So now, it's noted, and it has been raised with me a number of times.
Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions?
We got 2.
Mary?
This is a question about the tariffs again. How effective do you think Buy Canadian is today? I mean, seriously effective.
I think it gives ordinary people, and I think people like myself and you, it gives you a feeling you're doing something. And I realize it's not the solution. I mean, now we're into that. Is Heinz, are they back making ketchup in Canada? They claim they're French, being the replacement. I got a laugh, I haven't posted yet, but tonight there's some Canadian ads running on the Super Bowl stuff, which I'm going to boycott. I don't want to see Trump. I don't want to see Taylor Swift. I hate to tell you this. But Tim Hortons are running these ads using the old hockey song that Stomp and Tom had. Do you remember that one? Soccer Night in Canada, right? I think it's really amusing. I mean, the Tim Hortons that's owned by a Brazilian corporation. So what is Canadian? And I think it's helpful. And I know I did another mayor's call the other day with this Border City Alliance group we put together. And there was a lot of negativity, this is BC and Saskatchewan, I'm sure you name it, about the booing at hockey games. And I had someone suggest, I mentioned to Rosie Barton last week about let's not put up the American flags this summer. And I haven't made a decision on that only because of the 30-day tariff thing. But it's a symbol, but it's not, it's not going to resolve the issue.
That's,
But I really feel, we were talking earlier about, I've never seen it like this before. I mean, COVID was difficult, but the anxiety level with people, I'm amazed how many people have told me, because some said, why did you organize a boycott of going to the States? No. Public has to decide that, but they're doing it. I'm hearing repeatedly from people, I'm not going to Florida this year. I'm not going to Arizona. So everyone can do their own part, and I think that's what the Canadian, stick to Canadian product. I have asked at City Hall, got an answer, how much are we buying from the Americans goods and services? It's very, very low. It's only a couple of %. So, but I think everything you can do, but this is the easy part, to be honest with you. We haven't even got to the tariffs and what could happen and what else could happen. So that's why I'm trying to pace myself on this with these issues. So yeah, I mean, the booing at the hockey games, I used to go to every year to Detroit Tiger Stadium for opening day, right? And we used to boo the governor. We never boo the mayor, because you can't do that. But it's just sort of a tradition. And so I don't know, but people are angry. And I think, to sum it up, with people on the CNN thing, what's it all about? I said, it's that Aretha Franklin song. Maybe Steve, you can play that after. Respect. For all these years, we did all these things, and we had these good relationships. We had the flags flying and we had international events. And now it just seems we don't matter. And I think that's the problem, is the disrespect for us. Hey, you pull us out of Florida, it's in big trouble.
that's right.
Yeah. So now, I think everyone can do their own little bit.
My name is Norm. When you were saying about just now about the impact in the States and what's happening, just before I
Excuse
came
me,
here,
could you
I looked,
put the mic
sorry.
to your mouth, please? Thank you.
just before I came here, I was looking at YouTube, and they showed you pictures of Sarasota and this real estate agent down there, and this Uber driver, and he was driving around. He says, normally, he says that the streets would always be packed at this time of the day, and he says there's nobody here. He says I've had 2 people that I drove, and it was a short distance. He figures he made a total of $4 for the day. He says it's never been like this at this time of the year. Normally it's full of people. Well, of course, a lot of them are Canadians that have gone down, and a lot of them just decided, I don't need to be told I'm going to be the 51st state. Forget it.
Yeah.
That's one. The other one, you were talking about housing people. They were saying about people in in Rainbow there. And I came originally from Toronto, and I lived in Hyde Park, nice neighborhood. And they had said they were putting a halfway house into our neighborhood, and people were protesting. And they said, I don't care, you're going to get it. They took this one house, they did it up like you wouldn't believe. Beautiful brass door, all kinds of things. They had it as a halfway house, and people said, we're going to have vandalism, we're going to have robberies, and all kinds of things. And there was never any change in the neighborhood. There was no robberies. There was none of it. It has to be manned properly. But if it's manned properly, yeah, you can have places like that. And the idea is, one of the things they didn't want to do is, they didn't want to put them up at the Jane Finch corridors, because that just breeds more crime. So they put them into a good neighborhood. There was a limited number of people they would have in there, and they would be staying there. They would go in there, and they would be there for about 3 months. And the idea is they have to blend in with, they have to learn to work with society. And because they put it in a regular neighborhood, they would come in, they'd be there for anywhere from maybe up to 3 months, some of them. But when they left, no problems with any of them, and they were able to get back into society and get jobs and so forth. And it makes them worthwhile. Whereas if you isolate them or say, well, not in my neighborhood, and if they don't get to mix with real people, then you're going to wind up with vandalism and all the rest of it, because they didn't know where else to go.
3 quick points.
Yeah.
Talking about the interval home, I've been through 3 or 4 rezonings with them. None of the fears came true. And I also recall, it was always a favorite story. There was a group that led the opposition to the the Good Shepherd Kitchen when they went into the church on Divine Street. And I met with them and trying to get them not to appeal to the Ontario Municipal Board, and they decided to, right? What I loved was, a year later, a number of them were actually working in the soup kitchen, helping people. And one of the things we're going to enlist, I was talking about the opposition building, and this hub is really critical for this community. Believe it or not, it has to be open by this April. This is government saying we're going to open something in 3 months, so location is critical. But who we're going to draw upon, I'd be talking to Paula, the CEO of the hospital, quite a bit about this because they're sort of the driving force. I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan's House. It was started by a mother who lost her son, 25, 26. He'd gone away to rehab, got on the bus, ended up in downtown London, ended up in a hotel room dead a couple hours later. So she's a real dynamo, and ended up getting Ryan's House. So Ryan's House is right by Northern Prairie Park. It's the big house. It was a young offender facility 20, 30 years ago. It is where people can go after they come out of the treatment beds and then go there for 30 days. And that's why the hub fits in. Once they get through Ryan's House, you sort of just pre-screen them and then go there. But my point on why Ryan House is important, we're going to try to enlist that neighborhood who were opposed to Ryan's House and no longer are opposed and are supportive of the place. So people fear the unknown. I mean, I understand that. And there are some horror stories that come along, but you just can't say we're going to marginalize this part of the community. And it is difficult because I have to deal with the neighborhoods, but we need this hub. But again, respect, that's what it comes down to, is respect for people. And you know, when I've gone quietly, I don't go with any media or anyone else to Rainbow Park or to the shelters, I see people looking at me and looking away from me. And I know them. I knew them in another life. And there's a song by Blue Rodeo, which I love, called It Could Happen to You. It's about Giuliani sending the billy clubs in the parks in New York with the homeless. But most Canadians, they say 40% of Canadians are only 2 paychecks away from being homeless or in a tough situation. So again, just trying to get that empathy level. People understand, and we've had, well, going to names, people call them vile criminals and all this other stuff. They're human beings. Not perfect human beings, I don't know who is, but something's gone wrong. There's a good story you got a chance to read about 4 weeks ago. It was a former member of the provincial parliament, lawyer. He was homeless. And what happened? Divorce, bad illness came along, disconnect with the family, so he's living on the streets. People stepped up and raised some money to help him. That's good. But it's a story, again, it can happen to anyone. Anyone at any time. So good points made, and I'll keep that story in mind. Thank you. I'm sure you want to wrap it up. The pregame for the Super Bowl, which I'm ignoring today, starts at 9 o'clock this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.